Hello, Fairbanks. Welcome to this version of Facebook Live. Very happy everybody's here. I'm Karen Gaborik, Superintendent of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District, and this is our budget update. We've just completed phase 2 of the school district budget. So as I've explained before, the budget process for the school district actually takes quite some time. We begin collecting input in the fall, in October and November. Did a great community-wide survey this year, and it was the first time actually that I extended beyond just school district employees, and it opened it up to parents and community members, and so we got some great survey results. And then I start building the budget in December, and my proposed budget is submitted to the school board on February 1st. And then the school board spends time digging into it, mostly through work sessions. Sometimes we meet with school board members individually if they have questions, especially new members, spend time with them walking through the budget book. And then the school board at the end of March determines what budget that they are going to recommend to the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly. And so the board passed a recommended budget, and it's due over. We actually are working on, we just finished up the draft, and we'll be printing copies of that to send over to the borough on April 1st. So it's a great, I feel like we're 2/3 of the way through. So actually, and now we wait for a while, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We let the Borough Assembly do their work, and then of course we also wait for the state legislative session to finish up. So, but let me tell you what's in the recommended budget. So again, we talked about the assumptions, the funding assumptions that are built into my proposed budget that have been approved or have been recommended by the board, and so those assumptions continue. One is the assumption that the school district will get the funding from the state that was approved by the legislature last year. And actually, I'll talk again about this more later. That is, I think, what's going to be in play in Juneau this year. What that assumption is a flat-based student allocation, so the same amount per student that we had the prior year, or this actual current year, plus an additional $3 million to the school district, which was actually $30 million statewide. So that amount of state funding is assumed in the recommended budget. The other thing that's assumed in the recommended budget is the same level of funding from the Fairbanks North Star Borough. And so that's approximately $51 million. And I've been working closely with the mayor, have really established a very positive relationship with the mayor this year, and appreciative of his communication with me. He will come in with a lower proposal than that with the Borough Assembly when they start their work. But again, he explained to me that he's going to start low, but his recommendation will be for that status quo level of funding for the school district. So he'll make that proposal very shortly, actually, to the Borough Assembly, and then they'll start their work sessions. The school district is slated to make our presentation to the borough regarding our budget, and I believe it's April 18th, Thursday, April 18th, and it'll be myself, it'll be school board member or president, Wendy Dominique, and then also our Chief Operations Officer, Andy DeGraw. So we'll give a little bit about the state of the schools, and then we'll dive into the numbers and show the Borough Assembly what all is included in the recommended school district budget. So there's still some things that continue that are the same that we talked about last time with proposed. One of the most important things is that our enrollment is declining. And I was just looking at some numbers today as I, again, prepare for the presentation to the Borough Assembly. And over the last, I think it's 20 years, our enrollment in the school district is down by almost 2,000 students. So, you know, there is a significant downward trend. And then I was at the governor's presentation, the chamber event this morning, And the governor referenced also the declining population in Alaska. So again, you have a declining population, and you have, of course, also declining student enrollment numbers. And it's not just Fairbanks experiencing this; it's statewide. So it's just something, again, your district grows to accommodate the number of students you have, and I think over the next few years we're really going to have to look at some shrinking, to make sure that we stay right-sized with our student enrollment. So there's right sizing that happens every year based on enrollment. So we actually do have in the recommended budget teacher reductions, but those are not due to any change in target class size. We've kept all the target class sizes the same for next year that they are this year, but there are reductions based on reductions in teachers based on that reduced enrollment. So total in elementary schools, it's 13 teachers. So we'll need 13 fewer teachers next year. And then at the secondary level, it's actually 8.7 secondary teachers. And those are spread across the districts, and those principals have had those numbers for quite a while, and they're working on their schedules, and their teachers know that, again, they'll be reducing their staff size a little bit. We also have worked our way through, for the most part, almost all of the staffing that we need to do for the new charter school that's out in North Pole. So Discovery Peak Charter ran its lottery, and so it's almost hit its target number of students. They're a K-8 school, and so their 8th grade class did not fill with the lottery, which isn't necessarily unexpected. A K-8 school, it's not, not too many students might want to go to a new school just for one grade level. They did have some 8th grade students sign up. So they're going to run another lottery in a few weeks, I think, and see if they can attract any more 8th grade students and fill that class. So the district is going to, I've actually moved 4 teachers from North Pole area schools over to Discovery Peak because there were, of course, a number of students in the North Pole area, and you can identify which schools they came from that will not be going to, say, Midnight Sun Elementary or Tickosick Brown or North Pole E. They're instead going to go to Discovery Peak. So we've shifted staff to Discovery Peak for that. And then I'm still going to add 6 teachers to the budget, to the overall budget, specifically for Discovery Peak Charter. So some of those will be elementary, and also a couple of those will come from North Pole Middle School, because remember, North Pole Middle serves 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. So there's 3 impacted grade levels there. So let's see, also in the recommended budget, the investments that I proposed are still there. So adding a full-time teacher to Joy Elementary to help them expand their K-8 model. Joy is doing great things with their K-8 model, as our Arctic Light and Ladd Elementary. Also, I added a prevention intervention specialist to Tickosick Brown Elementary. And then in terms of the secondary investments, we've added 1.5 career technical education teachers. So a full-time position and then a part-time position, and those will go to North Pole High School and to West Valley High School, and so that will help those high schools meet the career technical education course requests that they get from students. So these are very popular classes, and we want to make sure we give those schools the teachers, and those are very specific certifications too, so you have to be very intentional with your CTE teachers and your allocations there. So I've also added, and they continue to remain in the budget, a 0.5 prevention intervention specialist at North Pole Middle, so getting their current position up to full-time, and then the same thing at North Pole High School, getting their current prevention intervention specialist position up to full-time. So that will help them out in meeting the needs of their students in those schools. We have reductions in central office, and actually with the recommended budget, I have added to the reductions in the district office. And it's not just, district office is a bit of a misnomer. Some of these positions are on the district office phone list, but they work in other places. So because whenever we have district-wide positions, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily in this building all day. In fact, many of these folks, like a social service manager, only comes in for a meeting every once in a while. In the district office, they spend all their time in the schools, but they're held under a district-wide program. So I have we have some reductions in the district office. We've got some reductions in the administrative services department. We've got a couple positions there that we're cutting, and then also a nursing clinical coordinator. I've added that to the list of staff that we're going to cut. in terms of our district-wide support. A couple other reductions that we're making. We're also cutting a position for a North Pole Middle School swimming aide, but this does not mean that swimming will change at North Pole Middle. North Pole Middle will still hold swimming. They've had an unfilled swim aide position for the entire year. Mr. Smith, the principal out there, tells me that the swim program's doing pretty well. Without that, if he finds that he needs it, then we'll look at adding that back. But right now, we don't need that program. So, I'm sorry, we don't need that position. We do have the swim program. So, and then I've also made reductions in staff travel and supplies and equipment, and so that offsets some of the additions that we've had to make. We had to also add 2 teachers to Tanana Middle School. Every once in a while when you do budget, you miss a couple things and you've got to be sure and pick those up. In August, we added 2 teachers to Tanana. They had more students than expected, which is great news for Tanana. So it's not, even though you have declining enrollment, sometimes more kids show up than expected at a particular school. So we need to definitely carry those over into the next year. In the fall, if we find that we don't need as many teachers as we do sometimes at schools, we'll move folks around. So but Tanana's projections are looking good at this point. So those are the sort of the big pieces of the recommended budget. Let's see, I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, I think everything else we've talked about a few times. There are a couple costs that are not yet accounted for, and so we'll work those in as we move through the final phases. One is that we know we'll have labor costs that have not been completely determined yet, because we are in negotiations with all 3 of our employee bargaining units. So Fairbanks Principals Association, very close to finishing up, and hopefully we'll hear news. We'll have a press release out and hopefully have some news out to folks pretty soon regarding the principals. We're also in negotiations with teachers and with our support staff, and so those negotiations are progressing well, and I think we're making good strides. Of course, as a superintendent, and I think for the association too, I think everybody is very hopeful that you get those contracts negotiated, you get that done by the end of the school year, so that then you could just take a break over the summer and start the year, with a new contract. And of course, we're always hoping for 3-year contracts. That in recent years, that's been our goal, and that continues to be our goal, because that provides stability, to the entire workforce. If you just know that you have a contract for the next 3 years, and what the not only the pay, but what the guidelines of those contracts will be for a full 3 years. So that's in place. Again, so the Borough Assembly will go through their work. So that number is not determined. That contribution, that local contribution, is not determined until the Assembly acts, and that'll be near the end of April, that they will make their final budget decisions. Again, I am fully confident and appreciative that the Borough Mayor will advocate for status quo level of funding from the Borough Assembly. We'll do our presentation April 18th, and then usually I go in and sit with the Mayor and answer more questions during a work session later in April. So we're hopeful that all that will go very well, and that the Assembly will continue to support the school district. So I have every reason to believe that that will be the case. And so then it's the legislature. And so I was just down in Juneau, the Alaska School Administrators Association, the Alaska Council of School Administrators, which includes superintendents, principals, and business managers. So it's a big organization. Just hosted a fly-in in Juneau, and it's really a great event. Our executive director gets almost all of the legislative leadership, both from the Senate and the House, in front of this group. And then, of course, we do individual meetings with the Interior Delegation and with other influencers in the legislature. And here's what I heard. I heard that what the number that will probably be in play at the end is that $30 million of additional education funding statewide that was acted upon last year, but it could be that they'll make some different decisions around that. Of course, the conversation in Juneau mostly right now seems to be, what will be the level of the PFD, what's an acceptable level of the permanent fund dividend, and then where will the cuts that were recommended by the governor, the legislature, of course, will make the House and the Senate separately, and then they'll have to work together, will determine what level of cuts that they want to incur, and then also what that level of dividend will be. So I think the challenging piece of all of it is also it's very clear, and there doesn't seem to be anybody who disagrees. Everybody says that for certain session will probably go till mid-May, and that's, I think it's May 15th is the longest they can go. Before then, they would have to get called back into special session. So that's the extension that's allowable. Past the May 14th or the April 14th deadline, they can go another 30 days without then getting called into special session. And everybody seems to think they will be in session until mid-May. The challenge for the school district is always the same. It's exactly the same challenge every single time, and we advocate. Legislators understand, but they just have to do the best they can given the situation. And that's that I have a statutory guideline, a deadline of May 15th, that if there's any chance that I might need to give notices to tenured teachers, I have to start my layoff process. And I have to have all that taken care of by May 15th. So that's just the challenge of it. And again, I feel like, especially the Interior delegation, they're very responsive. I feel like legislators understand that, but with the House getting organized so late this year and getting started so late, it's just, even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to get that work done. There's a very interesting constitutional amendment, which I don't know that will go anywhere, but at least it's part of the conversation. Mia Costello is, suggesting that the legislature basically require itself to provide education funding early in the session, get it done. And so that's interesting. That would be terrific for education. I don't know that they're going to be able to, accomplish that this year. But so what will happen is the weeks of May 14th, or April, I keep saying May, April 14th, when the regular session ends, I believe is a Sunday. I should look at that. Look back at my calendar. On April 15th, I'm going to have to use whatever number seems the most realistic at that point. And then I will have to start making some noticing decisions. And so if it looks like that the school district very possibly may not receive that $3 million or whatever the number looks like it might be, and then I'll probably have to be fairly conservative to leave, ourselves some room. I will then have to make staffing decisions, give principals their staffing allocations based on that, if there's any potential cuts to teachers, and then start working on preparing notices for teachers if we're going to go possibly into our tenured ranks. Now, the only way that you get to tenured teachers in terms of noticing is if there's not enough non-tenured teachers, if there's not enough room there to move, and also if you don't have enough attrition. So we have a normal rate of retirements and people moving, and we're on trend with the last 5 years in terms of what that sort of normal attrition looks like. If it looks like the cuts might go deeper than that, if it also looks like the cuts might possibly not be able to be absorbed within the non-tenured staff, and it looks like possibly it might go to tenured, then I'll have to send out those notices pretty broadly. And the place that it hits non-tenured almost every single time is secondary, and that's because of the very specialized certifications at the high school level. So, and also we have fewer high schools, right? And so, you only have so many chemistry teachers. You have lots of elementary teachers. Many of them are K6, K8. They have a lot more flexibility in terms of, the grade levels that they can teach. But your chemistry teacher, who might have a couple science certifications, and many of our teachers have lots of certifications, but they can't teach English typically, right? I mean, they don't have the English teacher certifications, so that's where you start to hit your tenured rank. So principals are very aware of this. They're looking at it. They know sort of in the back of their head that cuts might be coming, and they're thinking about what that might be. But I am not going to put a number out there until, again, the end of that regular session time frame, so April 15th. Then I'll start moving forward with whatever it is we need to do to notice. So let's see, what else? Oh, looks like Mr. DeGraw just came in, so that's great. We were just talking about the session. And he's actually been in negotiations, so you're gonna have to scoot over here so you can get in the, yeah. So if you haven't been watching previously, Andrew DeGraw is the Chief Operations Officer for the school district. So we just met with a couple principals. We were down there with Robin Taylor and Shauna Henderson, and so elementary principal and also high school principal, and so we were down there all advocating together. So I haven't talked about the governor's budget yet. So again, there seems to be a fair amount of confidence that, you know, what the governor proposed in his budget is not what will happen. However, you know, there is that number. That's basically the number we have right out now until the House presents a budget and the Senate presents a budget, and then, like I said, they start to work on it. So I will be on a panel at Chamber next Tuesday at the Westmark, and myself, and I believe Dan White, Chancellor, and Mayor Ward, and there's somebody, TVC? Okay, so somebody else is going to join us. It's going to be a panel of 4, and we'll talk about the impact of the governor's budget on basically the economy of Fairbanks. And so I'll focus on the school district piece of that. But if the governor's budget and those cuts were to go through, we'd be looking at a total reduction of almost 235 staff district-wide. So that would be, you know, 42 and a half district-wide support types of staff. So staff that, like I talked to, I'll use just again, a social service manager is a good example of a district-wide position. Also school support staff, so staff that support students, then they're not the teachers in the classroom necessarily, but they're part of that support mechanism. Almost 108 of those. And then about 85 teachers is, so when I put together a budget based on the governor's budget, that's what we're looking at. So so that's significant. The piece that really gets people's attention is when you look at what those potential class sizes would be. So kindergarten would jump up from 22.5 to 24, and then you go down to high school. High school would jump up from almost 30 to 42. So, you know, around the state, we hear the same thing, right? There's not enough room in classrooms you can't fit 42 desks in a classroom. It doesn't even make sense. And so, you know, you've got, I don't know where to start. There's, you got fire marshal issues, you got all kinds of issues. So it just doesn't even make any sense. But, so more on that when I talk to Chamber next week, and again, we'll keep doing updates. But I really don't want to belabor the governor's budget too much because the sense is that we need to be thinking that something will be coming, but it's not going to be to that magnitude. So I don't know, what's your take on it, Andy, is after your visit to Juneau?
Yeah, I was impressed with the strong support from our delegation, just really supportive of public education and maintaining, you know, class sizes, services for students, and just, you know, we with all the different dynamics that we deal with in the classroom and as a school district every day, a $30 million cut to our school district here in Fairbanks wouldn't help anything. It would just exacerbate our attempts to deliver a quality education. So, and I got the feeling that our legislators all understood that very well. So, yeah, the focus seems, and you probably already covered this earlier, but just the focus is really kind of, they're focused in now on that 30 million supplemental funding. So
now again, not to be confused, because the governor's budget, their total cut to us is about 30 million, but that's different than the 30 million forward funding. You'll hear people call it forward funding. Is really, that's statewide. We get about 10% in Fairbanks. That's 3 million to us. So when you hear about forward funding and the potential that might get cut, that's 3 million to us. So just something to keep in mind. So talk about, you know, one thing that came up too was the administration, the governor's administration. The Office of Management and Budget has started to talk about the idea that, well, you know, school districts can absorb these cuts because they have fund balance. Well, that might once have been true for Fairbanks, but we have used our fund balance. And again, I think people don't understand how that works. So I'm going to let Andy walk through that. And let me tell you, Fairbanks, even though for for reasons that we weren't expecting, which he'll talk about, and also decisions that were purposefully made that reduced our fund balance in December, we are still in better shape than some districts around the state who are skating on such a thin margin. And I heard from more than one superintendent, they might have 1 year depending on the magnitude of these cuts, and then they're truly looking at bankruptcy. I mean, they are not solvent, with this kind of reduction. So there's something to be said for fund balance, and you got to find that place, that reasonable place, and so hopefully we're striking that balance. But anyway, I'll let Andy talk about the fund balance, where we started and where we're at now.
Yeah, a lot of lively debate in the community here locally about our fund balance level and the dollars that we had set aside. I will say, based on my conversations with school districts, on our part, there was a lot of wisdom put into the decision to set money aside for fund balance. We started this fiscal year, July 1, with approximately $33 million as the school across all funds. There's 5 main funds that we're focused on, so that's not just general fund, but our risk fund, food services, transportation, and equipment replacement. And in our FY19 budget that went into place July 1, we had 2 planned utilizations of fund balance, about $6.45 million planned to come out of general fund, and then another $6.32 million slated to come out of those other 4 funds that I mentioned.
And that was for use in the current year. So those are things, again, about fund balance that I don't think people recognize it. It stays there, but then you start to use it as a revenue source. Yeah.
So between 12 and 13 million planned by the Board of Education from the beginning for FY19 to be spent out of the fund balance. And then in addition to that, a couple of unexpected or unanticipated utilizations of the fund balance. 3.1 million approximately due to reduced enrollment. So
significant again this year, and I talked about that before. If you've been watching, I mean, over 300 kids down this year from what we were projecting. So and hopefully we see some relief from that in the F-35 embedment, but those are things we can't plan on. So about a little over 3 million there to reduce enrollment, and then about 7.4 million set aside in our capital fund for the 2 roofs that was negotiated with the borough on the borough ordinance that was passed. So new roofs for Wood River and Ben Eielson. And they're school roofs. They're school projects.
For Wood River. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Wood River and Ben Eielson. So at the end of FY19, we have estimated a little less than 10 million, about 9.83 million to remain in our fund balance across all funds. Again, in my conversations with other business officials across the state, we're in, relatively speaking, a good position because of those dollars that were set aside. Other districts, I don't know how many, I talked to several that have cut. They've cut, basically the analogy is they've cut to bone, and the only thing left to cut, as we anticipate some kind of cut coming out of Juneau this year, is there's just services directly related to students. They've trimmed the fat, so to speak, across the organization, and there's nothing left. So the fund balance, I don't think we can say it enough how we're able to maintain those services.
And here's an important piece of the 9.8 million that, again, we anticipate being available. I have planned in my proposed budget, and it's carried over into recommended, about 7.8 of that being utilized for the next school year. That takes us down to 2 million.
About 2 million.
Now, that'll right-size itself a little bit. We always have vacancy rates, and so, I mean, there's always an increased amount at the end of at year's end. But we need that, because then if I use 7 million this year, that creates a hole. And I think at one point we calculated going into fiscal year 21, we're going to have about a $12 million hole. That again, it's to fill. If you don't have fund balance to do that, then you end up having to cut. So. And
just to put that $2 million in perspective.
And I mean cut before you even talk about other revenue sources. That's just cut because of the amount of fund balance that you've used to carry forward. So you're just constantly trying to, again, like I said, to find that place where you're using fund balance responsibly. You're also saving responsibly, and again, it was over $3 million that we did not anticipate at all was going to hit us this year with reduced enrollment. If that happens again, and again, the F-35s are coming, but it's the first couple of years are a slow buildup. It's not 300 kids all at once.
Right.
So, yeah.
And just to put that $2 million fund balance that would on paper be remaining at the end of next year, that would be 1% of our operating expenditures in a year. And you talk to any business owner, any kind of size, and a 5% fund balance, rainy day fund is seen as appropriate. And some folks look at 5% as a minimum. So 1% we're really kind of down to very low numbers. So.
And we took away some things like, we had other fund utilization. We had that equipment replacement fund that we were attempting to build up so that, like the borough, the mayor is interested in a long-term deferred maintenance plan. We just saw this the other day from a report that we got from technology department. We have almost 20,000 devices in our district. And so we're talking about iPads, Chromebooks, laptops, over 20,000, right, between students. Well, you have to have a long-term plan to replace those because they're good for Chromebooks, not even as long, but 3 to 4 years max on some of these things.
And it takes a very robust infrastructure to run and facilitate that many devices in schools.
And that's not counting, school safety. There's equipment required for that. That's not counting, fleet vehicles in our facilities department. I had to get our custodian here at the admin center building needed a snow plow, right? I mean, he does his work around the building to plow around here. So again, without a plan, there's just no way each year to take care of those costs. So we had a plan. We've backed off a little bit on that. I've encouraged the board to reconsider that in future years, and hopefully they'll see the value of building that up again so that we can replace equipment.
Extremely difficult to pay for larger purchases and expenditures on a year-to-year basis. It takes that organized
and to leverage. Again, you want to leverage the best either purchasing or lease deals that you can when you're looking at student devices too. Yeah. So so that's those are the big topics. I think, actually, why don't you talk about the, I noticed you've got the Business Association, the State Business Association had some great talking points that they put out. They worked on while we were all down in Juneau, and so maybe just a couple highlights from, what the business officials across the state, 50, probably 4 school districts represented altogether when you count Mount Edgecombe. So what?
Yeah. A lot of the focus on the business side of things is looking competitively at the big issues, which are retirement and health insurance. Just trying to get a better system in place than where we're currently at. The retirement program that we're currently running is a big part of people's consideration to either come to the state of Alaska or remain in the state of Alaska. And so trying to get some better options, and also just to educate people on the benefits of the current defined contribution plan that we have. Trying to get a handle on health insurance costs. That's a big topic. It's becoming a bigger and bigger piece of people's household budgets, and naturally a bigger piece of the school district's budget as well. So that's certainly a challenge, looking at different options there. And then just as an organization, we talked about how as business officials, and I think this is obviously translates over to superintendents and kind of the education world as a whole, is that we don't necessarily take a position on the permanent fund itself in isolation, but we don't feel like a full or a large permanent fund dividend should be pitted against public education. It shouldn't be an either or choice. And so we don't support the permanent fund being pitted against public education. And then just we're advocating for the state to diversify and establish a more diversified revenue base at a statewide level, rather than just solely depending on the price of oil, production levels, just a really volatile situation that we're in, kind of a boom and bust situation. Not kind of, it is a boom and bust. And so if we could diversify our revenue sources at the state level, that would build in a lot more certainty and allow school districts and other organizations across the state to plan and have a strategy built in for the services that they roll out. So.
One thing I heard from the governor this morning was again, an acknowledgement that there are districts that are doing well, there are schools that are doing well, that there are bright spots across the state. But when you look at the NAEP scores, and that came out in where Alaska falls, we're 50th. And so there's a whole conversation around NAEP scores and what those do or don't mean. I think what I'll bring to the Assembly, and we'll share again here, is let's look again at Fairbanks, and of course what we have are peak scores, because NAEP is just a sampling of a couple schools in a district. So we'll look at our peak scores. We're doing testing right now, and show that data, show the growth that we've had. Our graduation rates have increased significantly. So again, when you bring it down to the local level and you look at the quality of education that we provide in Fairbanks, I mean, people are very proud of education in Fairbanks. And again, all you have to do is talk to a military family. I just had this conversation, again, with a military family who said, we've been all over the world, and the education in Fairbanks is amazing. And when we were given an option of a couple different places, we chose Fairbanks because we did our research and we knew that. So,
and I kind of bring that same dynamic to the
there
table,
you go.
right? A family of 4 kids, and we've been in 2 other areas, 2 other states prior to Alaska, and the quality of education that we're rolling out to students is a high quality education, and that's based on my experience, my personal experience. So
I think the other conversation that you'll again, this might be in the nitty gritty of the media. We'll see, the finer print, maybe not the opening paragraph, but that is something that started to percolate. Is Donna Arduin in one of her reports, I believe. I don't remember which body she was reporting to, but indicated that the amount of money in Alaska that goes directly to the classroom, to instruction, is like 54%. Well, there's no correlation between the data that she was using, which is U.S. Census data from 2016, quite a while ago, but compared to Alaska and how Alaska actually requires us to report how funds are spent. So statewide, the amount of money allocated toward instruction is 76%. It used to be that we were required to hit 70%. There were some rural districts who had a very difficult time hitting that number because of outside costs, and you can imagine utilities and that sort of thing. But Fairbanks is at what percentage?
yeah, we're right between 76 and 77.
76 and 77%. So I mean, we are more than meeting what that threshold was set at, and far above 54%. So when actually, Dermot Cole had emailed, and we're having a kind of a conversation statewide about where that number came from. And my initial speculation was, I wonder if that number just comes from teachers only. And so we're finding, as we work through the conversation, that when you look at just teachers, it's much lower than 76%. But no school runs on just teachers, right? So you have to have your support staff. You've got, a school needs a nurse, a school needs secretaries, a school needs a principal, so there's many other things that support the function of instruction in a school district. And then again, a superintendent friend of mine said, and so it's not like we're arguing with the formula, but are you saying that if we can't turn the lights on, that doesn't impact instruction? Utilities are a cost. There are costs to running a school district. And, in Fairbanks, I mean, utilities, you've got to plow the parking lots, right? Yeah. And we all know that, depending on what the snow year is like, there's costs associated with that. Is that a teacher in a classroom? No. Can the teacher get to their classroom if they can't get to the parking lot? No. It's all part of doing business.
Along those same lines, the 76-77% number that we're talking about does not include, for example, building secretaries. And right. I don't know how many parents I've talked to that are asked, does the building secretary impact your child's education? How many parents would say absolutely? A great building secretary impacts the lives of students and definitely impacts their educational experience. But an example of something that's not in that 76%, food service, bus drivers, right. Everybody has the ability to impact. Custodians. So again, you start parsing these numbers out to make points, and you oversimplify things, and so it takes a little while to first understand where the data came from, and then to say, come on. Absolutely. So another interesting piece, I'm going to have this ready, I hope, by the time I go to chamber. We should have this ready.
there was also conversation around like, well, what percentage is being spent on administration? And then when people are talking administration, they're talking me, Andy, they're talking like, high level administration.
Right.
Now, typically principals get lumped into that, which is fine. They're administrators too. But again, these really crazy numbers about the amount spent on administration. And I think statewide, it's 6%, right?
Yep.
6%.
Yep.
You show me a robust private business where only 6% of their costs are spent on administration. I want to see it. I do.
Yeah.
So, we'll look at what our number is.
We as a district are right in that same range, that 6% range.
Oh, he's already done the math.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
there you go. So again, we are not out of line on these things. I totally get that teachers are the last place when cuts come that we want to cut. But you have to keep those things balanced. You can't then say, well, we're just going to go to custodians, or, well, we're going to go to secretaries, or, well, I don't need a CFO, or, you know what I mean? Or I don't need to run buses, or,
We don't
again,
need to
all these
issue
people,
paychecks,
right, all these people that function outside of the classroom that contribute to a high quality, strong district. So none of us does this job alone.
Yeah. No.
Everybody, it's really a team effort. And please hear me. I am constantly tasking my team with reorganizing. Every time a vacancy comes up, I say, do we need it? Can you do something differently? Can you shift? Can you, because we know that we have to be the first one to take cuts. That's just how it goes. And so let's be ready for it, and let's not wait. And we don't need to be told to do it. If we could do it, we do it. So
Yeah.
we get that.
Constantly here in my department and several departments here within the building here, just looking at how can we do things more efficiently, how can we streamline processes. And Dr. Gaborik just mentioned every time a vacancy comes open, we scrutinize that. Do we need this position?
And especially right now, especially since the governor's budget came out, I told folks I want to see every position.
Every single
I mean,
one.
you tell me why you need this position, and some we need, and some we need to reconsider. So.
Right.
You also have to invest. And again, it doesn't matter if you're being cut, if you're flush, if you're status quo. It doesn't matter. You have to invest in certain things. I will always invest in professional development across the board. It is critical that people get professional development and training in this job. That's teachers, that's principals, that's anybody in any position, right? That's your CFO. I mean,
Right.
People need professional development. You have to stay current in your profession. I don't want my doctor doing surgery on me if they haven't had any
Right.
training in the last 10 years. I'm not going to that doctor if that's the
Right,
case. So
right. Or an accountant watching the books, to not be up to speed on
That would
rules
be
and
helpful.
regulations. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
yeah. So again, there's things you have to invest in. We've made an investment in personalized learning, and we're really starting to see get some traction on that, and meeting the needs of every single child. That is so critical to me. Not just some kids, every single child, and being able to do that in ways that teachers can do very different things, not just in their classroom, across the school, and that's starting to get traction. But you have to invest in those things. So I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, definitely. I don't know if it will be done by Friday, but by Monday, the recommended budget will be posted on our website. We'll have up on the banner there. The photo gallery we'll update all our buttons. We'll have the dates for the Borough Assembly meeting. If you would like to advocate locally, I think it'd be great. Send a letter of support to the Assembly, support the mayor, and say, hey, please continue education funding locally. That local contribution, it's about 26%, I think, is what we're at right now. 26% of our total, so about a quarter of the money that we get to run the school district comes from the borough. And so please advocate that they continue that level of support for the borough. And then all eyes on Juneau. So I would say just watch the ripples, and you can. I start getting lots of emails and requests to testify when you see some crazy things starting to come and go. And again, a quick email, and you can do it so easily online right now. All it has to be is support, again, whatever you're advocating for, whether it's public education, whether it's social services, whether it's public safety. If you have thoughts about the PFD, any of that, just send them an email. Every single legislator's office we were in, and of course Senator Bishop is terrific for this.
Yeah.
He knows how many emails he's had that week and what percentage were for or pro or con any particular topic. So they keep good track of this stuff. So they also had a very good handle on the input from around the state from all the listening tours that the different groups and bodies have done, and we're very tuned in with the feedback that they've been getting. So yeah, so again, I think we're I feel much better than I did when the governor's budget dropped, but you know, there's still work to be done in Juneau, and the legislature is now digging in to do the work. So, yep.
Just keep advocating and hope for the best.
Yeah, yep. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Always love doing these Facebook Live events, and I'll be, like I said, at Chamber next week on a whole panel with Chancellor White, with Mayor Bryce Ward, and with somebody who I can't remember.
CEO of Tanana Valley Clinic.
The CEO of Tanana Valley Clinic Healthcare. So that'll be huge, and yeah, we'll talk about the impact of the governor's budget on Fairbanks, and probably everybody will just talk about. I saw President Johnson down there in Juneau. I mean, everybody will give an update about sort of their take on how things are going. So. All right, we'll see you in a couple weeks, and thank you so much for tuning in to our Facebook Live this week.